Familiar faces and some new faces as well. So welcome to our first speaker series of the year. It's a wonderful, wonderful topic that I'm really excited for you guys to participate in. For those who I have not met, my name is Mike DeCandido. I am the co-founder and board chair of CommonBondz. Our other co-founder and President April Adams will be on in a bit, and you'll hear from her at the end. So just a couple of administrative items before we jump in and announce our participants tonight. First and foremost, I'd ask you to leave your audio on mute. You certainly can keep your video on if you'd like, or turn it off. We just ask you, if you plan on multitasking, to have your video off. The other thing is we really want this to be interactive. It'll be an interactive dialogue between our moderator and our panelists, but we also want to get your questions. In order to have the evening flow appropriately, most of you are familiar with the chat feature that's in Zoom. So we'd ask you to use the chat feature to ask your questions. So if you have a question, just go onto the chat feature, ask your question, and then we'll have Io, who's going to moderate, get to as many questions as he can as the dialogue goes along. And then also, if you want to see just the speakers speaking, just go to speaker view and you'll be able to see the speakers and won't be able to see anybody else. So with that, welcome again. And I'm thrilled to announce our expert panelists for this evening. First is Natalia Brown. Natalia is a resident of Harlem and works in New York City. She is the Chief Compliance and Consumer Affairs Officer for National Debt Relief. She's been there since near its inception in 2010, has held a number of leadership roles. Most recently, before her Chief Compliance and Consumer Affairs role, she was the Chief Operating Officer for 4 years. She's also been the VP of Client Success, a Director of Training and Development, and the Manager of the Negotiations Department. Natalia is very, very involved in the community. She volunteers and leads a number of different organizations, New Women New Yorkers. She's on the advisory board of 4 Steps Forward. She's a co-founder and president of Inspiring Youth. She's an executive board member of the American Association of Debt Resolution, and we are really, really happy that she is a recently added board member to CommonBondz. So, Natalia, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And as I go through the brief overview of our experts, you could find more detailed bios on them and their background and history on our website as well. So I encourage you to go there after the session if you haven't already. Next, we have Youseff Tannous. Youseff, welcome. Youseff is the market president and retail leader for KeyBank in Eastern Pennsylvania. He has been with KeyBank since 2013 when he graduated from SUNY Albany. He's had a number of leadership roles and has led a number of different regions for KeyBank. He is a aspiring traveler or a traveler. He likes hiking. He is a real estate investor. He speaks 3 different languages. And I think off the top of my head, you've been to 28 states and 16 countries. So Youseff, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And again, a lot more details on Yousseff's background and his bio. So we have 2 wonderful, wonderful panelists, and thrilled to have Idowu here to moderate our session. Io, many of you may remember, was a participant panelist for us a while back. So he is a frequent contributor to CommonBondz, and we're so happy that he is here with us. Io lives in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul. He's a financial advisor for the largest wealth management company in Minnesota. He is a vibrant and engaging speaker. He's a graduate of the University of St. Thomas. He's an accomplished football player. He played in college and he played 3 years professionally before pursuing financial services as his other passion. He's an active board member of the Black Chamber of Commerce in the Twin Cities. He's a board member of the Sinai Foundation, and he's a frequent contributor to ESPN and WCCO radio in the Twin Cities. So, Io, appreciate you moderating the session and participating as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you and have you get us started.
Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's good to be back. I always love these conversations because It's obviously always important information being talked about, but I just think the way CommonBondz does a good job of packaging it, not finance is something it's usually hidden in a certain corner of the United States, and I say corner, I mean not necessarily geographic, but certain classes of people only know what certain things are happening. But when we can take it in layman's terms and make it a conversation, I think we really get rid of the stigma when it comes to conversing about these options. So I'm really excited to talk with Natalia and Youseff. Both we've been speaking for the past week about how we're going to go about doing this, and you guys are in for a treat because these are some really smart folks that have a lot to share. So make sure you got your notebooks out. So again, today's topic is going to be debt and credit management strategies, obviously for marginalized communities, but really just in general, helping individuals figure out how they want to navigate debt, whether you're in debt already, whether you want to avoid debt. We're going to be doing some myth busting about debt, and then figuring how we can navigate credit from, I love the fact that we have Youseff here because he works for a bank. I always say when you can have somebody from a bank teaching you how to get a loan, that's like getting the answers to the test before you walk into the classroom. So I'm excited for both of those. So here's my first question. It'll be for both of you guys. When it comes to debt and the conversation of debt, why do both of you guys feel it's important? Natalia, I'll let you, or I'll call you Nat because I know you like being called Nat. But Nat,
So
I'll let you go
easier.
first.
Thank you. So I just want to start with a statistic where 49% of the Black community makes $50,000 or less, and that was in 2022, a Pew Research study. For this year, it's projected that middle class is between $50,000 and $150,000. That means about half of the Black community is not capitalizing on on credit management, savings. There's a lot of reasons for that, which we'll definitely talk about it. Yeah. But I do want to look at kind of the family aspect. I'm generally speaking, some people grow up with their parents teaching them all the things, but for our community, it's usually children are seen, not heard. There is not this financial teaching at home that you see in other households. And it's generational. If we want to get to a place of generational wealth, we have to start having these conversations. We have to start taking away the stigma from debt and kind of get away from the myths, like you said, myth busting, where some people are afraid to use banks. Financial literacy is intimidating. There's a lot of reasons why we need to have the conversation as much as we possibly can, put a positive spin on it as much as we can, and support each other as much as we can as well.
No, I love that answer. I think what you said really resonates with me because I just think about growing up, when we talk about how half of Black people being in debt, it's, when we grow up in our neighborhoods and we grow up in our, in our churches or wherever it is, we're with people. Most people you see talking about debt, it's a negative light, right? And I get into my business of wealth management. Some of the richest people I work with are leveraged up to their necks, right? And again, we see people making money off debt, but they're not afraid of being in debt. Meanwhile, some of the debt we're dealing with scares us. So I feel like as a kid, I remember I was telling you guys a story the other day. As a kid, I was afraid of debt, right? So much so I didn't get a credit card. In my mind, I'm like, if I ain't got it, I'm not getting it. And if I can't afford it with my regular checks, I'm not going to do it. But, how do you afford a house? How do you afford a car? X, Y, Z. Debt can't always be bad. So, Youseff, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Natalia covered it extremely well. I'll share just to add a couple things. My background before I got into banking, my family and I moved to the States in 2002, and we moved from a different country and didn't have really anything to our name, and that conversation was not a conversation we had in our family, just because we didn't really have money, and my parents didn't have credit. So really, for me, the way I learned about the importance of debt conversations when I got into banking and got my first job out of college in banking. And I really started to realize the difference, to Natalia's point, like there's a difference between good and bad credit. And there's opportunities and ways we can leverage banks and leverage credit to actually build our wealth. And especially for, I'll speak from my background, not coming from wealth and not having that ability to inherit that money, like a lot of Americans across the country. You have to find a way to really leverage those resources available at banks to really build your wealth and understand like what are the difference between good credit or good debt, bad debt, and then what are some debts that you can take on that can help you build equity, build wealth, and eventually kind of break the cycle within that generation.
Yeah, it's funny because people don't realize banks want you to make money, right? It's a place where they want you to make money because the more money you make, the more money you can give them and they can charge you even more, right? So it's one of those things we got to stop being afraid as a community and start utilizing these banks rather than be afraid when they send us letters, because usually the letters mean it's time to pay. But obviously the concept of debt is something to grow a bigger asset. Okay, so let's move forward. Let's talk about somebody who's already in debt, right? Things happen, emergencies happen, or just youthfulness and frivolousness, which happens with a lot of us. If we're already in debt, what are some strategies? Nat, this question's for you. What strategies do you recommend when it comes to getting out of debt? Because we know what it's like when you owe somebody money, you tight, right? Anytime that phone rings, you get stressed. So what's
Yeah.
it like? What are some strategies you recommend when it comes to getting out of debt?
So it's you have to have a brutally honest conversation with oneself, right? And with the family, if there's a household that's impacted by debt. The first step is to really understand what can you afford. Like, you're already in this place. Can you afford to get out of it without any additional help? Can you make your more than your minimum payments? Are you living, paycheck to paycheck plus what you were spending on your credit card? Right now, you're past your means. So that's the first step. Where are you in this debt landscape? And then you have some options. So typically there's 5. There might be more. Youseff, you can call me out if there is. But the first one is just paying it, right? Take an assessment, cut out some spending that wasn't needed. You can afford to pay it back, pay it back. The other options are when you can't, right? So you can either do credit counseling, you can do consolidation loans, you can do bankruptcy, which is really a last resort, or you can do debt resolution, which is an alternative to bankruptcy. So if anybody has questions about what those actually are, throw it in the chat and I can give you more details about it. But those are the options that you really do have when it comes to resolving your debt. You got to have that brutal, honest conversation. What do I need versus what do I want? That FOMO, fear of missing out all the time, keeping up with the Joneses, which is something I also see in the Black community. And I'm not any different, because my first paycheck, I went and got a pair of Coach sneakers and a matching belt. And instead of having that be my first experience, what it should have been is, I'm going to go get my first stock and be just as excited about it, right? So I think it's just a mental shift, and we have to have that conversation with ourselves.
But you can't match the belt to your stock, like I'm not really mad at you.
But I could have bought 10 more belts
Ooh,
in all the
come on.
colors, right?
I love it.
Had I just waited
I
for
love
that
it.
to mature, right? So there's always, what I want now versus what I want in the future. So sometimes I like to call it, don't try to deprive yourself. Think about it as thriving.
Yeah, because one of the things, I work with a lot of kids, run youth football camps, and they're trying to get into college and play football. Let's say the grade point average mark is 2.5 and the kid has a 2.0. I always talk to the kids like, well, coach, I got to get a 2.5 for the rest of college. It's like, that's not how it works. Since you started below, you have to do more to get to, you have to get 3.0s to get to that 2.5 now, right? And I feel like that's the tough part about debt, because being in debt doesn't mean, okay, let's start living within our means. It means let's start living really within our means, because now we have this portion of our income being somewhere else. So on top of just getting right, you really got to be ridiculously disciplined, which, would you say that's a mental thing? Would you say that's a personality thing? Do you got to shut yourself out from the world? Like how do you, what strategies do you see help people out with that?
So I think that's a failing strategy. If you cut yourself off from the world and you go bare bones, it's not going to last, right? It's kind of, words matter. So if you tell yourself, I'm not going to eat sugar, you're going to fail, because you're going to crave sugar because you're constantly telling yourself not to do something. When you know negatives, they always feel bad. What you can say is, I am going to make one healthy choice every single day, right? Mm-hmm. That has a different connotation to it. It's a lot more motivating. So it is absolutely mental. When you see these big numbers, I'm in debt, I don't know how I'm going to get out of it. You, again, have that conversation, but to your point, you don't have to give up your latte if that's what you really, really have to have every single day. But you might get rid of the extra shopping that you're doing every weekend because you realize it's not something that you actually need. So right. Once you do that assessment, it really is, I like to call it a come to Jesus moment. You got to be real with yourself and be real with the people in your household around what spending is, what do we need versus what do we want, and what are the nice to haves that we can probably afford, but we can still get our debt taken care of.
I like what you said about the big number, how it can be scary, because I had a football coach one time tell me that, like, He used to say, "How do you eat an elephant, guys?" He goes, "One bite at a time." And I still don't know what that means to this day, but I think it kind of falls into what you're saying. It's like if you look at the whole project of what you want to get done over the next 5, 6 years, it's going to be overwhelming. But if you create that plan and kind of take a step to it, it's easy to take a step forward every day rather than to walk 10 miles. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So pitfalls between income and expenses. Obviously, that's one thing. Budgeting. It's one thing you got to kind of control when it comes to paying off debt, but at the same time, staying out of debt. So what are some tips you have when it comes to that?
Is that for me?
That is for you again. We stand on you right now. And
Okay.
then Youseff, I'll let you touch base on that one as well.
So I think, well, I mentioned already, I think the biggest pitfall is, sometimes your expenses are not really expenses, they were just wants, right? The other one is not having kind of a backup plan. When there is an opportunity to save and those unexpected expenses come up, you're just going to be that further much in the hole, right? Because there's, I've had clients who had full coverage, or at least they thought they had full coverage, and then they had an accident and everything wasn't covered, but they had no savings to cover that balance. Right now, they're immediately in debt because they use credit cards or loans or whatever it is to get it paid and continue, to get healthy. So it just goes back to not everyone made bad decisions or decided to just spend frivolously. Anybody can end up in a situation where you think you have everything lined up and then it's not. So the biggest pitfall is, not planning ahead for those things that you don't know that are going to happen. And I think the other one really is not taking advantage of your side hustles. So everyone has a talent. Everyone does something every single day where someone like, oh, you should do that. You could get paid for it. It doesn't have to be extra work. It doesn't have to be something that you are making up from scratch and you hate it. But if you're already a painter, sell some paintings. If you're already a knitter, sell some scarves. And that actually helps to close that gap, especially when income is less than expenses.
Youseff, I'm sure you have some experience, especially in the banking industry. What are some things you see with the same question?
Yeah, I think it really, to Natalia's point, like it does take, it's a journey first of all. So, you may get a lot of marketing, or someone approaches you like, we can help you fix your credit or get you out of debt like overnight. It's just, those are the too good to be true type of approaches, and I think it's important for us to be careful with some of that marketing that's out there. I think one of the biggest things that we see when it comes to debt is student loan debt. That is actually probably one of the most major factors of what's holding some of our consumers back from being able to move forward with home ownership, or being able to build equity, build wealth, and then also credit card debt. So it is very tempting out there. I used to work in a retail store before I got into banking, and one of the things they tell us as an employee is like, find a way to get somebody to sign up for that credit card, right? And they'll try to talk to you about 10% off, 20% off, sometimes 30% off. And it is really tempting. But think about those credit cards. They have generally 30, 35% interest rate. So that 30% you're saving, you're going to pay back in interest, and you're going to pay back if you don't end up obviously paying off that credit card, and potentially damaging your credit. So it's really important to say no a lot of times when it's not the right thing for you. It doesn't mean credit cards are bad, but if you find yourself in a position where you are struggling with debt, credit cards are probably not the next step for you to continue growing that profile, but maybe looking at fixed debt, debt that's going to help you consolidate that loan,
Right.
bring down your interest rate, and then put you on a fixed payment so you can get to a path of paying it off.
I remember like 15 years ago when I was just a baby intern in the wealth management space, we had a client with a lot of money, like more money than I had ever seen at that point in my life. And they went to buy a house and they took out a mortgage. And again, the way I grew up, I'm gonna get rich so I don't ever have to take out debt or be in debt with loan XYZ, pay for everything cash. I just remember, like, I was telling my boss, I'm like, wow, some people just never get out of that mindset. Like, why would you take out a mortgage? That's stupid. You got millions of dollars. You could have paid for that cash. And he sat me down, he kind of chuckled and he goes, well, this money he's got over here is working for him, making money. So why use his money when he can use the bank's money? That being said, that kind of clicked for me that debt isn't necessarily bad. There's good and bad debt. And Youseff, you started talking about that. Can you kind of explain some examples of good debt and some examples of bad debt?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I will say, mortgage debt is usually good debt. I mean, it depends obviously on the deal that you get on the house, but overall, when you look at the housing market, it generally increases over time. So you have an opportunity to build equity. So that's always a debt that's backed by something. So anything that's really backed by some type of security is generally good because it's got that equity that you'll be able to build, and it has something that's backing it. Fixed rate debt that's unsecured is also not awful, but it's really good to make sure that when you're looking at your credit score, one of the components of credit score, 10% of it is the diversity of your credit. So between unsecured debt, which would be credit cards, line of credits, and then fixed rate debt, which would be more regular loans, car loans, and mortgages. So I think one of the best ways, and I'll speak to my experience, is I started off with a secured credit card when I was 18 years old, and that's when I got into banking. So I was kind of educated on that process of building credit. I got a secured credit card. I had zero credit, and at the end of that first year, my score was over 700 just from having that card, which then gave me the power to apply for regular credit cards. And then that gave me the power to then take a look at, getting a car loan, buying my first home. But it did take that discipline of budgeting, looking at my income, looking at my expenses, and then really saying no when it's the right time to say no when it came to like some of those temptations out there with credit.
So I'm gonna stay on you over here, Youseff. We're gonna step a little bit into credit. What exactly is credit? Like, obviously, we know the credit scores, we know what a credit card is, but like, what can you break down like from the most basic Merriam-Webster definition of credit? Just let us know what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So credit really is what determines, for a bank, it's kind of like a report card, right? So when you apply for a credit product, credit card, mortgage, the bank's going to look at your report card essentially and take a look at your history of payments. Generally, that is based on credit type products. So a lot of times, like rent payments will not be reported. Sometimes they will. It just depends on your landlord. Some landlords report it, some don't. But for the most part, they don't. So once you start building credit, there's components that essentially weight your average score, overall score. Part of it's going to be, if you're paying your bills on time. The other is what type of debt that you have. How often do you apply for new credit, and so on. So all these things come together and they give you a score, and the banks have a chance to look at that score to determine how qualified you are to get that next credit opportunity.
Okay, so I went to Nat's office because I was in a lot of debt, and she helped me get up out of debt. But obviously, my credit score is kind of jacked up at this point, right, Youseff? I guess my question to you is, how do I A, build it back, or B, what can I be doing to track my credit score, making sure my credit score stays strong?
So that's a great question. There's a couple different factors. So to pay off that debt and then have to rebuild your credit, it really takes time. Time is of the essence. Like it is like I said earlier, it's a journey. So it's not going to happen in the next month. It may take 6 months. It may take a little bit longer. It really depends on the severity of what was paid off and some of the items on there. But looking at your credit, a lot of banks offer that. If you have an app, if you have their online banking, or if you bank with a regional bank or larger, generally they'll have the ability for you to go on your online banking and look at your credit score every month, and it'll update. It'll keep you posted on that. Of course, I work for Key, so I'll say KeyBank has it, but I can also say some larger organizations like Chase Bank, Capital One, or if you don't have a bank or a resource, Credit Karma could be one. It's not the most accurate, but it gives you a ballpark of what that looks like, and gives you some history there. So it will take time to, of course, rebuild that credit, but the fact that you've paid off that debt is going to begin repairing that credit naturally over time. And then from there, you really want to look at looking at a secured credit card. That might be an option. A secured credit card is ultimately you putting, let's say, $100 in a savings account. The bank will lock up that money and they'll give you a credit card for $100. And they'll say, hey, here's a credit card for that money you've just locked up. And then over the next 6 months, stay on track with payment history. We'll report it back to the credit bureaus, and over time, that's going to slowly help you improve your credit score.
Same question that we're trying to boost up the credit score, or where a young kid who just found out what the heck a credit score is. What do we do to keep it clean?
Well, I can tell you from
How
my
about this,
personal
Alex?
experience.
I'll extend your question. Extend this for you too.
Yeah.
What is going on in that credit report that's making my credit score go down?
Well, definitely missed payments, generally speaking. And
I was about to say it better be generally speaking. You don't know
yeah,
my...
generally speaking, is missed payments because there's so many factors. Every individual is going to be different.
Now, is this missed debt payments or is this just missed payments in general?
Missed debt payments. That's what's being reported. Anything that you have revolving, whether it's secure or unsecure. If you missed any of your mortgage payments, any credit card payments, it's going to show up and it's going to have a negative impact. And then there's something called when you're over leveraged, right? So if you're debt to income, so if you have $10,000 in debt, but your income is only 5,000, you are over leveraged. You're going to get probably a big hit in your credit score because you're over leveraged, right? It means that you probably do not have the ability to pay because you're constantly revolving a large debt balance. For me personally, funny story, I ended up in a situation the opposite of Youseff. I went and got a furniture set and I got the store card and it had promotional interest. They got me.
They got you.
I ended up in collections and I had to figure it out. And I actually had to call on my mom to help me out at the time because I'm a college student. I don't know what's going on with the world. So I ended up having to pay it. So there was a rebuild after that. So I learned certain tricks where I pay my credit card bills right before they're reporting to credit agencies, not just when the due date is, because sometimes they're not the same. So I can lower my debt to income ratio. So there are little tricks and tips that I've personally done to take care of it. One thing that's important for people that do come through National Debt Relief is when they leave the program, because they have a deposit every single month, but once we take care of their debt, they're still used to making that deposit. So then it builds savings. Then you can do what Youseff and get a secured card with that same amount of money that you're so used to doing over 2 to 4 years. So there's still, it depends on what your goals are, right? So sometimes people look at credit and it's, oh my gosh, my credit is terrible. But it's like, well, were you going to buy a house? Are you buying a car? No, I'm in debt. So your credit score is not the most important thing, even though we have this idea that it is. On this debt journey, credit score may not be important. It's only important when you're getting to those points where you're financially healthy and you're looking for that home or you're looking for that new car and you're looking to actually use your credit score. So that's an important distinction to make. Some people are afraid of their credit score going down, but it's not always a bad thing. It's like you're in a repair stage.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. That was I'm glad you put that in concept into consideration for the conversation. But here's my question for you, Youseff. I'm coming to KeyBank. I'm about to get a loan, right? And I feel like naturally people just go like, I hope they apply, like I hope they get me, right? And then maybe they get approved or denied. My question is, you're on for everybody to hear. What should I be doing before I come see you? And is there any way I could like cheat before? Like, can I check some of the stuff y'all checking so I can know whether I'm about to get denied and I can maybe go see Nat for a little bit, build my credit up, and then come back to you? Like, what should I do?
So a couple of things that everyone could do. So number one is building a relationship with your bank is an important component. So you know, I'm sure everyone on here is from different parts of the country, but if you have a relationship with a bank, your chances naturally of getting credit is going to be higher than walking into a bank where you don't have a relationship or a history at all with that bank. So if you're walking into KeyBank, no relationship, you want to get credit. If you have, obviously strong credit history, there's probably going to be a pretty high chance you'll get some type of credit. However, if you've got some things on your credit you're still trying to work through, and you also don't have a relationship with KeyBank, it might be a little bit challenging. Same with any bank. But if you have a bank where you do have that relationship, and there are some things on there that you're working through, maybe your credit's relatively average, it's not the best, but that bank might take a chance just because you have that history of a checking account or transactions or years of history with them where you've been a really loyal client. So, number one is looking at your credit score. If you have a chance to find your credit score somewhere through, Credit Karma, other resources out there, every product's going to have a different requirement. And it's not just the score. We also do look at derogatory remarks, which means, late payments or bankruptcies. So someone could have a strong score, but have a history of utilizing high credit. So what I mean by that is someone could have $10,000 in credit card limits, but they use 9,000 of it. They're using 90% of their limits. They could have an okay score still to generally you think they'll qualify for a loan, but we may turn them down because we're afraid that if we give them more debt, they're going to max that out as well and get into more trouble ultimately. So there's many different factors, but I would say, talk to your local banker at your branch. Every bank's going to be different. There's some local banks and credit unions that have different requirements as well. But that relationship with your bank can definitely make a difference. So it's really good to ask those questions to your banker before you apply for credit and have that go on your credit score as another inquiry. So it's really important to do that research before you continue applying for additional credit.
But why y'all gonna give me a line of credit if I can't use it all? Like, come on now, that's on you guys. Y'all shouldn't have gave it to me, right?
Yeah. So listen, that's a thing that we hear very often. I think a lot of times, what I would say is balance out your credit, right? I talked earlier about like having a balance of fixed rate loans and line of credits. Ultimately, if you have a good balance of that, that's going to offset a lot of the line of credit utilization. But one of the things that are not really bank related, it's more FICO related, like Experian and all these other credit components. They do take 30% of your utilization rate, and they essentially weight it out to give you that score. So from a banking side, we're going to give you that advice of, hey, try to stay within 35% or less of your utilization, because the credit bureaus will ultimately hold that against you if you do max out your credit cards.
And these are the same credit bureaus you guys use when looking up my credit score, correct?
Yep. So we use.
So essentially, I could go to see what they got going on and know exactly what you guys will be looking at before I walk in, rather than get surprised.
Yeah. So a lot of these credit bureaus offer free credit checks as well. Yep. Right on their websites.
So next, I want to talk about predatory lending, right? Now you brought up a great story, and I appreciate it because I feel like we've all, especially in our younger days, ran into something where, we was getting ready to buy a couch and said, "Hold on, I'll give you this couch half off for like you ain't got to make payments for like 2 years.
Yep.
Go ahead and get this credit card, right?" You can't walk through a Delta airport without getting someone trying to sell you a credit card to get a free flight or something like that. What are some ways, Nat, you first, and then Youseff, I'll let you bring this up. What are some ways to avoid predatory lending and identify what predatory lending is?
Sure. So that's a heavy topic. I think we could talk about it for another 2 hours, but the reality is it's going to be a little bit of self-education. You kind of mentioned this, right? Before you go and have that conversation with the banker, or you engage with a third party for whatever reason, whether it's financial or not, you have to do a little bit of research, right? You want to know what those questions are that you need to ask. And you need to kind of have a little bit of background to know if that person's telling you the truth or not, because not everyone is a fiduciary, which means that they're always working in your best interest, right? If there's someone that's making commission, you have to make sure that your goals are aligned. So do that first step of education first. Then reviews are always important to me, right? So before I even buy something off of Amazon, I click down to 1 stars and see if these people are rational or not, and see if there's going to be an issue. You have to do that with everything, right? Sometimes we put more work into the garbage can we're going to buy versus what credit card we should get, right? We just are clicking or just saying yes to everything. So look at the reviews, look at, whether they're BBB A+ rated, right? If they're accredited, if there's any trade association. And that should give you a good idea of whether or not you should work with that person. I also like to play advocate, to put people against each other. So I might go to 2 different banks and have a conversation with 2 different bankers and say, okay, I like this banker more. This person was more welcoming to me. And I think, especially for the Black community, there are people who are apprehensive to go into a bank and have a conversation because they come from a place, or they feel like they come from a place of ignorance.
Yeah.
That's where the education beforehand, everybody has Google, or you can go to the library, just get that little bit of confidence so you can go in and ask all the questions. Like, it's their job to answer questions. Again, flip that mindset. They're working for me. I have questions, they get to answer them. So come in with that confidence versus shying away from going to have those conversations.
Right. You're the customer. They want your business. I think once people start realizing that, they kind of treat the banking system a little differently. What about, now I'm going to stay on you for this one. What about like if I'm buying a car, right? Or actually, let me take it back. For example, Home Depot has a really good credit card, right? You go to Home Depot, you fix some stuff around the house. Let's say it's like $10,000. They'll give you a year worth of no interest to pay it back. And then let's say it's a regular credit card after that, right? Like, how do I decipher what the good deals are and like what the horrible deals are?
Sure. So one, I'm going to say, does it align to what you're doing? Because like Youseff is saying, credit is a tool. If you
Mhm.
are rebuilding your entire house and you're going to be in Home Depot for the next 3 months every other day, then it probably makes sense to take advantage of that credit card. And you also want to make sure that you're not overspending, that you plan to spend $10,000 no matter what. Now
Mhm.
I can get a benefit, I can get points, I can get a discount, whatever it is, using that Home Depot card. So if you are going to get a store card or any card, it should work for you, whether it's points, gas, cash back, whatever it might be. You have to make sure that it was already planned. This is something that you already needed. It's going to be a benefit for you, and you can meet those requirements to pay it back before you take out that debt.
But you, Yusuf, same question for you, I guess. When it comes to predatory lending, what are some tips you see? And then even talk about some of the failures some people make and some stuff you see so we can learn from them as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So a couple things, first thing I would say is Natalia touched on this, and it's really, I think word of mouth is actually a really big thing that all of us should look at. So if you're going to a place that's kind of, I would say, strange to you, like you're not familiar with it, I think it's probably best if you could, before you get to that place of like asking for advice or credit, try to find somebody, a friend or a resource out there that can help recommend somebody to you. I think that could really be helpful. Somebody that's credible, somebody that's helped them. They can share that story with you, and then that person can also help you. I think that's also, a great best practice. And I think secondly too, if you feel like someone's being very pushy when it comes to credit, like you're just noticing during that interaction, it's really they're selling you on really getting that product versus asking you questions. I think the best salespeople ask on average 32 questions, and they're really more quiet and they're trying to understand your needs before they're making recommendations. So if you find yourself in a position where they're talking more than they are asking, I think you should probably pause and think about, like, does this person have my best interests at heart?
Mhm.
And if they don't, I think it's something to kind of pause. Nobody's on any obligation to sign up for anything. And I think a lot of times when we're sitting in front of a banker or a store clerk or somebody that's trying to sign us up for something, we may feel like they're in control of that conversation, but definitely try to take back control. You are the consumer, and ultimately, all these organizations need your business, and they're all fighting for your business.
Yeah.
So you have every ability to pause, go out there, shop as much as you can before you make that decision. So definitely take your time and do a lot of research.
I feel like a common uh debt that everybody has, which isn't necessarily a house, because obviously a house will make you money over time for the most part, right? It's not student debt, because even though student debt, there isn't really an asset backing it up. Like if you don't pay off your student loans, they're not going to take away everything you learn. But it's vehicle debt, right? Car debt. Because cars are one of those tricky things where technically the asset is decreasing, but it provides a lot of value for you on a regular basis, right? Like we can't get to our jobs without a car. We can't live in, I mean, y'all live in New York, so maybe you're cool without a car. You can't live in Minneapolis without a car. It's too cold 4 months out the year. You know what I mean? I'm not waiting at that bus stop without the heaters, negative 30-degree weather without my car, right? And so my question is, I see a lot of people get car debt, and I'll see some folks go to their bank. Some folks get financing from the dealership. Can we talk to kind of both of you guys' thoughts on those?
Definitely, I can jump in, and you know, I will say personally, I'll speak to my experience. I've taken out a car loan from the dealer. Generally, they have better offers, better rates than your local bank will. I will say, just from my experience, credit unions generally they're very strong when it comes to auto lending, and then also that dealer if they have some type of special on, if you're buying from them. Car loan debt is that kind of debt that's almost like unavoidable. It's something that you need. It's a necessity for a lot of us. We need to get to work. We need to get to school. I will say, I think it's just a matter of like what works for you, what's within, that means of our daily lives, right? Think about expenses versus income. It might be tempting to get this car with the bells and whistles, but is that going to help me or stop me from being able to take that next step when it comes to buying a house? So I think it's a matter of just looking at our own personal situation, but it's one of those debts that's unavoidable in a way. And it's not really bad debt. I mean, it's a fixed rate product. As long as we're paying it on time, it's generally not going to hurt us. If anything, it might help your credit score in the long run. But definitely take a look at expenses versus income, and looking at qualifying yourself for the right fit.
And that, before you answer that, I got a quick question. So obviously, um, taking out an auto loan, let's say you said dealers have the best rates. credit unions are strong, but what if I belong to a bank? Are you saying that, because before you said keep all of your business in one place for the most part so you can get good rates? Should I, a bank customer, go to um, the credit union to get a loan for a car? Or should I
So
just go to the dealership? Or should I ask my bank, even though it may not be the most favorable rate, it's still where I'm banking it?
I would say ask all of them. I think again, everyone has so many options, and it is great to build that relationship with your bank. You may have a checking, savings, and a credit card with your bank. That's a full relationship. I mean, every bank's going to look at that as a quality client. But if you're going to your bank and they're telling you, we're going to charge you 7%, but the credit union next door is going to charge you 2%. You've got to do what's best for you, and you can also have multiple relationships. I know it may feel like I'm cheating on my bank, but it's not a bad thing to have multiple relationships with different banks because it may not work out with Bank A, and you may end up wanting to go to Bank B, and you've already had that relationship with a couple different places. That's not an awful idea, but you've got to do your shopping and do your research, and something that I would recommend to everybody.
So what you're telling me is bankers don't believe in monogamy, is what you're saying, right?
Trust me, we want all your business, but we also want you to do what's best for you.
Dan, how about that same question for you when it comes to just taking out auto loans and whatnot?
Really, I just really agree with Youseff. I have multiple relationships for different things, right? Some savings accounts give more interest, or you might have opened it at one point and it changed. Now another bank is offering something better. So it really is whatever's in your best interest. You do want to have good relationships with everyone that you're banking with or you're working with. So that's always important. But you do want to diversify sometimes, and you want to take advantage of everyone's products. That's really good. And there is also a conversation to be had where you got your price matching, especially with insurance. Sometimes if you can find a deal somewhere else, you can take it back to, depending on what it is, take it back and say, hey, can you match this? Doesn't work for everything, but it's worth the conversation. If you prefer a certain relationship, it never hurts to say, hey, they're giving me 5%.
Yeah.
You're saying 7, can, let's bump this up and see if I can get that 5, right?
Yeah.
So everything is a conversation. And again, that's the confidence that you have to have. The worst they can say is no, but you can always ask.
Yeah, it's not Target where you walk in and the price is the price. Well, that's what people I don't think realize. They
Even
go
in
into these
Target, you can
places.
do it. You can say Walmart's got it for $2 cheaper. Target will take it.
Oh, for real?
For real.
Look, let me write that down. I
Look,
didn't know
April's like, yes.
I
Price
didn't know.
matching is a real thing. So do it.
No, price match is huge, especially when it comes to banking. It's like anytime I'm flying out of town for business, I rent a car. And the closer you get to the airport because you forgot to fill up the tank, the more expensive the gas gets. So my cheap self, I will take a U-turn, take 2 miles back and find that one I saw for 30 cents cheaper to go there. And it's like, that's one of the things, that's how we got to start treating banking, right? I'm on France Avenue, which is the most financial institutions per capita in the United States, is like on this 3 miles worth of land here in Minneapolis. And I see institutions after institution. I'm like, look, if I'm looking for a loan, I'm gonna walk down the street and walk into 4 or 5 places. Not only am I gonna find the best rate, but I'm gonna pin them against each other. Because at the end of the day, we are the clients. They want our money. And they might take a little haircut if it means getting our business. And that's kind of how I feel like when we're talking to people in the Black community, for me especially, is just like letting them know kind of how this system works. Because really, they could give you a bogus price, and as long as you agree to it, you're good to go. It doesn't mean it's the price is there. I got one last question. Oh,
Hey, I just heads up, you got some questions in the chat, so
okay.
we've got about 10 minutes left. We want to get to
Okay,
those.
perfect. Well, I got one last question. They may or may not answer this, but I think this is very important, man. I see a lot of stuff, and I'm not a big fan of these, but I see a lot of people on Instagram and social media talking about credit repair. They're repairing people's credit, XYZ. What are your guys' thoughts on credit repair? What is it? And yeah, whatever you can answer.
What can I answer? So credit repair is personally not my favorite thing in the world. There are a lot of companies out there that are either bad actors or very slow to make progress. They make promises that they actually can't necessarily keep. And a lot of options for consumers, you can go directly to Experian or TransUnion for certain services, right? I personally had to dispute something that was on my credit report, and I did not go through a credit repair service. I just went through TransUnion and said, hey, this doesn't look right, gave them the information, and it was removed. So that's essentially what credit repair agencies are doing, and they're charging sometimes ridiculous fees to do so. And there's not really a huge benefit or anything that a person can't do for themselves. That's just my personal opinion about credit repair. There's also just a lot of legislation around those companies that are happening right now. So if anybody wants to, do a little bit of research on what that industry is facing, it's all in the news.
So I should watch out if my cousin on Facebook is saying credit repair $200. I'm gonna get you right. I shouldn't respond to
Probably
the
should.
post. Okay.
The reality is it is a little bit of a money grab. So yeah, just be cautious.
Youseff, any thoughts on that before we go to the open questions?
Not much additional. I think Natalia covered it really well. I mean, we've seen, clients come in that told us they went to a credit repair company and, they applied for credit. We don't see any difference, but they just paid all this money to that company. So we don't do credit repair at the bank, but from my experience, I haven't seen much benefit from it, but definitely something to just research and be careful with.
Yeah.
I would say in my experience too, all the information you guys gave with the credit utilization, how many lines of credit, paying it back on time, it's crazy. The minute you go under that 30 or 35%, you talked about how much your credit score jumps up like overnight, right? So I would say those are probably some of the biggest things you can do. Let's go to the chat. I know we have a lot of questions. Hopefully we can answer all of these. But how can you determine the timing of when information is reported to the bureau to impact your score versus your payment date?
I'll take that one. So for me personally, I use Credit Karma, and you can actually look at your credit report, and it tells you reported on. So either you want to call your credit card companies and move your date to those dates, or you just pay it by that date, so that you can either make sure your cycles are syncing up so that you don't have to worry about it, or you just go and look at each individual line, each individual creditor, and you'll see what day it's reported.
How about you, Youseff?
Exactly what Natalia said, spot on.
Okay, perfect. That means it must be right if you both great minds start thinking alike. What's the best way to lower interest rates on car loans? The economy is wrecking my rates.
Yeah, that's a tough. I'll take that one. So that's a tough one. Listen, right now it's a rising rate environment. Rates are relatively high across the board. I will say again, like if you look at, we talked about auto lending earlier, but the best rates we're seeing right now is generally at the dealer, if the dealer has some type of promotional opportunity. But ultimately, it's not guaranteed, of course. But this year, rates are expected to go down. It all depends on the overall economy. But when you see that start to happen, keep an eye on it. You're marrying the car, dating the rate, right? That's what we call it. So if you get a chance, in the next year, refinance if the rates do go down. Refinance is generally a very low cost for auto loans. Maybe $100 would be the most that you might be charged for a refinance. And it's an opportunity to lower that payment, lower the interest as well.
Where does one begin the conversation on financial fitness? There's so many elements to master, but how does one build the blocks with their children, especially? So 2 questions. Where does one begin the journey of financial fitness? And then another question, which I'm very passionate about, how do we pass that down to our kids to make sure they're starting off on a good foot or even a better foot than we started off with?
I got 2 boys, so I can take that one.
Come on now.
The journey, I think, really starts with your goals. So for me personally, my goals actually come from my grandmother to my mother to myself to my kids, is this generation has to do better than the last generation. So that's our goal. Whatever that means, it's like you got to figure out what that means for yourself as an individual, but that's kind of our motto. So that journey is, I don't necessarily need a 100-house mansion. That's not the goal, right? I want to be healthy. I want to make sure that my kids can go to school without having to take out loans. There's certain goals that I want to do. So everybody's an individual. Youseff wants to travel the world. That's his goal. Can I travel the world for 10 years and not have to worry about whatever, right? So it starts there. Then you start working backwards. Well, how am I going to get there? I don't believe that there is any goal too big. You just need to figure out what you're going to do to get there. Dream big. I always say dream big. I think in our community, dreaming big is sometimes laughed at or poked fun at. Like if a little Black boy says, I want to be an astronaut, there was a time where people would say that's impossible, right? So I want to make sure that, whenever I have these conversations, anything is possible. You just have to figure out how to get there. When it comes to kids, I am fully transparent with my kids about our finances, what they have in their savings accounts. They both have savings accounts. They've both been to the bank. They both made their own deposits. They both have debit cards, and they understand how those transactions work. I'm sorry, are you tired? What time is it in Minnesota? What we doing?
My bad. I was
It's
up early
okay.
this morning. I was
It's
up
okay.
early.
It's okay. So yeah, I want to make sure we get all the questions, but be transparent. They know where all the money is. They know where their money is. They know what it is to save. We've done simulations where we, bought and sold stock, so they understand how the stock market works. There's lots of apps for kids. So it's really just a conversation. The same way you say, did you do your homework? Hey, did you save today? Or, how did you spend your money today? How did you spend your allowance? Put that into your everyday conversation, and it just becomes a part of life. And it's not just this extra thing. It's just what they live and breathe every day.
Youseff, how do we start? How do we start the journey, and how do we pass it down to our kids?
So I would say, definitely start young. To Natalia's point, I think financial education at a young age is extremely important. At KeyBank, we actually consistently do financial literacy education at local high schools across Philadelphia. And the one thing that's been impressive to me is seeing a lot of the schools that have now implemented a financial literacy course for students. And I think that's a really important question to ask the teachers, the school that your kids go to. And if they don't have a program like that, I would say the majority of banks at this point have some type of financial literacy department that's going out there presenting to different students. I had a chance to do it a couple months ago in Philly, and had a chance to talk to students about like getting ready for college. And historically, a lot of students, may get that advice of like go to that best college, the most expensive college, and they've got to take a look at like what fits for me, what works for me. And then as your kids are getting into that age of getting their first job, my first job was a teller at the bank after I kind of left retail, and I purposefully found a bank that would pay for part of my education because my parents did not have money to pay for my education, so I didn't want to take out a lot of student loan debt. So I would say look at those resources too from a employment side too. If there's some organizations out there that have resources to help your kids go to college, pay for part of their college, I think that could be a huge way to help them get ahead of their peers.
How do if I want to get a hold of one of the two of you guys, Matt, how do I get a hold of you? Well, Youseff, you first. How do I get a hold of you if I have any questions or anything?
So I think, Mike, I don't know if my email is going to be out there, but definitely send me an email. I will be glad to answer any additional questions. And if I can't answer them, I'll definitely refer you to the right person.
And Nat, before I ask how I get a hold of you, can you tell us a little bit about your nonprofit? I know we didn't really get to talk about that at times.
Sure. It's Inspiring Youth for Success is a nonprofit where right now we're working with PS 62 in the Bronx, where really we're trying to bring any resources that we can to an underfunded school. It's underfunded because the surrounding neighborhood did not do the census because they were worried about their immigration status. So that school is severely underfunded, but there's more than 500 kids in the school. So we go in to beautify, we are getting additional resources, computers, things for teachers. When I first did a tour, they were doing circuits on a piece of paper versus having real copper wire and batteries. So it's just a matter of going into underfunded schools for whatever reason it is and finding whatever they need, using all of my resources and connections to bring money to the school for these students because they are not at grade level when it comes to reading or math, and they're failing their state tests. So it's really important that our youth, not just for financial education, but just education period, is supported.
I love that. Well, how do we get in touch with you, your company, and then maybe if we're in the New York area, how do we help out with your initiatives with your nonprofit?
I think the easiest thing is to go to my LinkedIn because all of my things are there, and just shoot me a message on there like I'm interested in CommonBondz or IYFS or National Debt Relief, whatever it is. Just find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you guys. I think this was a very good conversation for a few reasons. I just think that is really scary. It's really, really scary, and it can get you acting out of character and do some things that either get you into more debt or make you think that you're attacking it the best way possible and not. I think one thing we see often is people get into debt and then all of a sudden they stop paying other bills to pay off the debt, or they stop maybe saving for retirement to pay off the debt. Things that are important, and figuring out a way to like simultaneously pay everything off is important. But then on top of that, knowing your options. I think when it comes to debt and credit, it's really all a game. At the end of the day, there's a report card or a scorecard out there for you that's telling institutions whether you are lendable or not. And if you can get a hold of that report card or scorecard, like I said, it's like having the answers to the test before you walk into the classroom. And then as well, I think social media, especially since the pandemic in the Black community, has been huge when it comes to finance. Could be a good thing. It's a bad thing as well, too, right? I think being aware, awesome. It's raising awareness, which I think has been great, but I think there's been a lot of people making some really stupid decisions based off somebody put on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, right? And again, if them folks on TikTok were professionals, they'd probably be sitting in the seats of, our two panelists. So getting the right information from the right places and busting a lot of myths. So I appreciate you guys for doing this and sitting on the call today.
First, happy to be here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
And I think I was supposed to flip it. Well, am I flipping it to April? April, what's up, girlfriend? How you doing? Happy New Year.
Thank you. Wow, thank you so much. Well, it's so good to see everybody after so long. Ayo, thank you. It's always good to see you. You always do a fabulous job of moderating and asking those questions. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Natalia and Youseff, thank you. This subject is really a passion of mine. It's really something near and dear to my heart because as you guys mentioned, in the Black community, this is so very necessary. Natalia, you started off with a statistic that the median income for a Black household is $50,000. You started out with
Less
that.
than 50, 49% is less than 50,000.
Yeah, and it's so important that we continue these conversations and have access to this information because I was one of them, but many of us were one of them. And what's important to realize, at least when I was growing up, I didn't even think it was possible. You live day to day, paycheck to paycheck, check to check, and you don't even know that it's possible to, like you said, Natalia, dream big or get out of debt or have things or go places. And you just, because you're just, I know my mother did the best she could and just making sure we had a roof over our head and food. That was it for us. But I found out and I backed into it. I found out because being poor wasn't fun. So I backed into this journey of wellness, financial wellness. I said, okay, so this is not fun. How do I get out of this? So yeah, so then you surround yourself with people who are where you want to go, people who have what you want. And so you learn different things. And I learned that it really isn't about how much you make. It's about how much you keep, how much you save, how much you invest. And my son taught me that. My son taught me that. I said, because I was growing up when they were younger, I was struggling. I was a single mother. I was like, we don't have enough to save. My son, Joshua, who's doing really well, said, Mom, yes, you can. He said, Mom, if you make $1, you can save a nickel, Mom. You can save a nickel. That's what he told me. And it really lit a fire under me. Yes, I can save something. It doesn't matter. I don't have to spend it all. So it really doesn't matter how much you make. It's about what you keep, you save, you invest, and you grow. And so I learned that. And so, yeah, so thank you guys so much for, I wanted to tell you, Ayo, yeah, everybody wants to, you can do it at Target, to Walmart, you could do it at the supermarkets. So if you say Kroger has this can of beans on sale, you take it to another supermarket, they will price match. They will. Everybody does it because they want your business. So yes, I
think we need to do a separate speaker series on how I can save some money.
How to price match.
Because I'm already locked in right now.
It is true. Everybody does it. But yeah, thank you again, guys, so much for this very, very important message. You know, I am teaching my children, they are teaching me, as I said, and we need to continue to have these resources, have these conversations, have these series available for our communities, because it's, you know, it's a thing that is very needed. We have to continue to share that it is possible. It is possible to get out of debt. When I said I had to work backwards, so I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew that a lot of debt, that you had to pay your bills, and a lot of debt wasn't that good, especially credit card debt. So I went on my own. Nobody told me. I just heard it somewhere, ordered a credit report, and I just looked at the smallest thing on there that I could pay off. And I started there because because being poor wasn't fun. I wanted to get out. I wanted to pay my bills. So I started there, and I didn't know. Now I know it's the snowball effect, where you take and pay off the smallest bill on your credit report, you pay it off. And then you can take that money that you paid that bill off and take it and apply it to the next one. I didn't know it was snowball, but I had started that journey because I wanted to do better for myself and for my kids. So we will continue to have these kinds of conversations. And thank you again, guys, for this. We really do appreciate it. I'm so happy to see you, so happy to be back. I would say just to keep a lookout for our next speaker series. We're not quite sure what it is yet, but look out for us in your emails or on social media. We'll continue to post, but we appreciate you guys. I say it all the time. We couldn't do this without you. We need you, and we definitely appreciate your support and everything that you contribute to CommonBondz. So Mike and I definitely thank you. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you at the next speaker series. So thanks again, everybody. Happy New Year. Have a good night. If all hearts and minds are clear, we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.